I guess I can say that I was there at the beginning, at the conception of this poetry festival. Feast-ival. Dory, Charlotte, and I attended the poetry festival, the Dodge Poetry Festival, which may no longer happen because of financial cutbacks. But we attended this festival back in September of the previous year, and the gestation from then to now has turned into this wonderful poetry festival. I took note of what was illustrated on the cover of the brochure for the festival. And it's a cave painting that is at least 35,000 years old. And we suddenly, by looking at this, have a connection with people who lived 35,000 years ago and had the desire to create art. And looking at it, there are pictures of horses, there are pictures that looks like rhinoceroses, butting heads. They wanted to express something that was important to them and in some ways permanent, in some ways would outlive their individual lives. And that's one of the things that poetry does. There's an inscription at the bottom by Walt Whitman which kind of also connects us in the same way that the cave painting connects us to each other. And I'll just read it quickly. This is from Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. Very appropriate, where we are. What is it then between us? What is the count of the scores or hundreds of years between us? Whatever it is, it avails not. Distance avails not, and place avails not. I too lived. Think of all of those lives that brought us from 35,000 years ago to today. The connection through art, through poetry, and through ceremony. And that's why I think ceremony is so vital, because it elevates, it enhances, it beautifies the connection between people. Now, I know one of the things that we always emphasize is that ceremonies celebrate life, but I think there's also a ghost in the room that we should acknowledge. And that is our mortality. Without the struggle to live, without the need to find a way to survive, our lives may not be quite as precious. Our moments together may not be quite as precious as they are. So this is what I wrote Charlotte when I decided I wanted to talk about mortality. Let me just mention, an old acting teacher of mine said, find in the role what juices you can make flow. And he would criticize people and say to them, it's not juicy enough. When I think of mortality in the same breath as I think of life, that creates the juices to help me do ceremonies. And there is mortality in every single ceremony. Let me just read what I wrote to Charlotte to kind of give you an overview of this, and then I'll read just one poem. The fragility of life is what underlies our need to embrace each other, celebrate our efforts, and value the time we have alive on the earth. We honor our ancestors who have gone before us, their struggles. We honor those present who help us survive and thrive. We honor those who pledge our lives to us and their vow to hold our hand as we die. In the best possible marriage, one partner has vowed to hold the other's hand as they die. And I think the richness of what celebrants do is enhanced by being conscious of our common fate. In the inaugural poem, how many of you remember the inaugural poem? A few people here. Okay. There were some lines that struck me, and they said, "Say it plain that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices that they would keep clean and work inside of." And I remember them talking about the fact that the Capitol building was built by slaves. Let us sing their praise. And let's remember the civil rights workers who died. That makes the moment so much more precious, I think. Let me quickly go to just a poem that could easily be done at a baby naming ceremony. And there's a line here about mortality that I think makes it just wonderful. This is by Linda Pastan. It's called Notes from the Delivery Room. Strapped down, victim in an old comic book. I have been here before, this place where pain winces off the walls like too bright light. Bear down, a doctor says, foreman to a sweating laborer. But this work, this forcing of one life from another, is something that I signed on for at a moment when I would have signed anything. Babies should grow in fields, common as beets or turnips. They should be picked and held root end up, soil spilling from between their toes. And how much easier it would be later returning them to the earth. Bear down, the audience grows restive, and I'm a new magician who can't produce the rabbit from my swollen hat. She's crowning, someone says, but there is no one royal here. Just me, quite barefoot, greeting my barefoot child.